At the end of the day, like those camp professionals, they are there to take care of these campers and to focus on the programming and to make sure that things run smoothly and to make sure that everyone is safe, right, at camp.
We know from camp directors and our partners that we work with, when the food is rating high or extremely high, they'll come back.
Man, if we can shoot off fireworks and practically get staff arrested at a camp and we can still come back the next year, then this is a great vertical that we need to dive into because they really need our help, right?
We had a massive thunderstorm, knocked out power to the entire camp right before a dinner service. The kitchen was the last thing that they wanted to worry about. Our team immediately shifted into problem-solving mode. The feedback afterward, the camp leadership felt supported during a stressful situation.
You're listening to Seasoned Leaders, a podcast about leadership, growth, and the power of hospitality. I'm Adam Guy. Today's episode is all about how solving one problem can completely change the direction of your company. What started as a way for us to solve an HR challenge and create year-round opportunities for our team eventually became one of the fastest growing verticals inside of our company. I'm really excited about today's episode because we get to dive into one of our verticals that is really special to me. So as a kid, I was a camper. I actually enjoyed going to summer camp so much that when I was in college, I decided and I wanted to become a counselor, right? I looked up to these guys that were counselors early on in my life and decided I wanted to do that. And so to now be able to have a vertical within Upper Crust Food Service that allows us to serve families and campers and kids across the country. It's a really exciting conversation for us to have here on the podcast today. And I'm joined by two of my favorite people and camp experts for sure. And that is Shanna Smith, our VP of Strategic Partnerships, and David Luther, our Senior Director of Camp Operations. So welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you. This is also our first virtual podcast. So, this is the first time that we've done this. So you guys are making history here on the Seasoned Leaders podcast today.
Trailblazers, just like in our vertical.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So what a great transition into talking about this. And Shanna, I'm going to start with you because you have been part of this since the beginning. You've worked for Upper Crust for how many years?
Going on 10.
10 years. All right.
Yep.
There should be an award. There should be an award for that. And I think I've teased you that if you give me another 10 years, isn't there like a prize at the end of the rainbow here?
There is a prize. That would be the world tour on a cruise ship. So we'll see how that goes.
Wow. All right. So see that is a pretty big carrot that's out there. So hoping that Shanna can make it for that next 10 years. But in all seriousness, you've worked with us for a long time and you've seen sort of the development of these different verticals and how this business has grown from a small business into what it is today and how it's scaled over the years. And I think that it was a really pivotal time in our company's history when we decided to get into the camp vertical. And for me, I think it's really important that we highlight the fact that, we didn't really get into this to say, man, we want to go out and start something new. We want to start a new vertical or we want to go try to find new business. This really started out of an HR concern that we had internally for this growing group of culinary professionals that were working for us. So can you kind of talk us, think back to those years and talk us through what we were going through?
So I remember the regional directors were coming to us saying, I need to figure out how to retain staff because we had these great people that worked through our school year and then either went to work for somebody else as temporary summer help and sometimes didn't come back. And we had spent a lot of time training, kind of moving them up promotionally in the company, and we needed to figure out how to retain them. And so I think that to me was one of the biggest pieces we were doing. And you and I went to our first camp show. We thought, how do we do this? And you and I camped as a child, and we went, what do camps do? And we went to that first show. It was back in San Diego, and we walked in. We wanted to see who was all in the room with us and went, huh, there's only one food service group here. I think we could do this. Wandered around, had no idea how it was going to happen, but we both camped and said the timing works out really well. Our people are out of school, camp starts, camp ends, and our people can go back to school.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we started to really think about this, but it was really trying to figure out how to retain people over the summer.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about this is that, the fact that this wasn't a planned vertical at all, but really came out of solving an internal problem, right? Solving that internal HR problem, and really this desire to take care of our employees. And some of the best businesses are started just by solving a problem, right? Being aware of what's happening in your business and being aware of things that you need to do to make your employees' lives better and to increase their enjoyment of their job and be able to increase retention. And so I just think it's really neat, sort of the origin of how this began. And the internal problems were not the only problems that we were trying to solve for here. Once we got into the business and once we started doing camps and started marketing our camp services, we realized that there were some major challenges that camps were facing. And so, David, I'd love to kind of bring you into this conversation because you deal with our camp partners every day of your life, right? You live and breathe camp. We joke internally that you are the camp guru. In all honesty, I think, if you're watching this podcast right now, there probably isn't anybody in the country that knows more about camp food service than David Luther. And so we're really excited to learn from you here today. But talk us through some of the challenges that camps face when it comes to food service management or management of their kitchen.
Yeah. So, realistically, it's most approaches tend to be a reactive approach than a proactive approach from camps that have tried to handle it internally. Constant issues with staffing, being undertrained and overwhelmed. You've got staff that are leaving halfway through the season, and just just chaos at the end of the day. You've got late meals, food shortages, slow serving lines, last minute allergy and dietary stuff gets missed, and it's chaos instead of being an enjoyable part of the camp experience.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot different than some of our other verticals in the sense that, if you are a camp director, you may not be a culinary trained professional, and you may have some experience in the kitchen only because you've been forced to be in the kitchen because your culinary staff hasn't handled things, exactly the way that you need them handled. But at the end of the day, like those camp professionals, they are there to take care of these campers and to focus on the programming and to make sure that things run smoothly and to make sure that everyone is safe, right, at camp. And so often we find that they end up getting stuck in the kitchen. And I'm sure you've talked to so many directors, right, who just feel this sense of relief when that's taken off of their shoulders, David.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of procurement as well, because I think that's a piece. We've talked about the employee piece. It's tough to get employees for a short period of time, right? We've talked about the fact that camp directors feel like they're stuck inside the kitchen. But procurement is also really interesting in these camps. And that's another major problem that we solve for, because, for a lot of these camps, one of the amazing parts about them is that they're in these remote locations that are just beautiful next to the scenic lake or up in the mountains or in upstate New York. But the reality that we forget about is these places are kind of hard to get to. And so from a procurement standpoint, you have hundreds of kids being fed 3 meals a day at a camp. You've got to get the groceries there, right? And so talk to me a little bit about that issue that we've seen.
Yeah, so not even just the issue of getting it there, but a lot of the vendors that are willing to go there only carry, a set amount of product. So they're kind of at the mercy of whatever that vendor's carrying. They don't have the opportunities or the leverage that we have with our vendors to bring in the fresh quality products or, get the kind of stuff that the kids would actually enjoy. It's more so, okay, well, this is what we're serving because this is what we can get kind of a thing.
Right. And you hit on it a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth kind of revisiting here for just a second. And that is the dietary needs. And I think that, 10 years ago, this probably wasn't as big of a deal in camps, right? Parents, for the most part, sent their kids. If there wasn't a life-threatening allergy, then, camps really didn't have to deal with it that much. But these days, you have, dietary needs. You also have dietary preferences. And the fact is the world is different, right? And there's an expectation in today's world that we're taking care of people's preferences and needs. And obviously we embrace that and we support that at Upper Crust Food Service. But that's difficult for a camp to be able to, have all the knowledge in the background and, the surf safe, the surf safe certifications to be able to handle some of the allergies and some of the things that we're seeing today. So is that something else you're seeing in camp?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When we first started getting into camps, the camp that I was stationed at, that kind of got me acclimated to the camp environment. I want to say we had split meal periods, and on average, we would have about 30 dietary and special allergy meals that we would have to prepare out of the whole group per 3 shifts. So you're looking at 90 special diet and allergies that we had to keep up with, make sure that they were not cross-contaminating. So no, it's a huge factor these days.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we are running a massive restaurant operation, right? Catering/restaurant operation, and to do that without professionals is a difficult task. And so I love that about this business as well, because we're solving all of those problems. And like we said, the best businesses are built on solving problems. And not only are we solving an internal issue, right, at Upper Crust with staffing, but we've also now solved problems that other people are having as well. And we've been able to build a really, really nice business around that. So Shanna, you've also seen all of these things that are challenges for camps. But when you bring in a food service like Upper Crust, and you put the culinary professionals in the kitchen and you allow the staff to go do what they do well, what is the ripple effect of plugging that into your camp that you've seen from our partners?
So I do remember one of our camps when we talked to him, and he said, we talked about dietary, and he said, I only deal with gluten. That's the only one I can handle. That's all my staff can handle. And I said, we can handle all of them. We can do them all. And he's like, okay, but my one person, and I go, our chefs are going to be trained. They know how to deal with this. So for him, he wasn't now under this constraint that he had kind of built himself, because his person could only handle one thing. And so when we came in, he was like, this is great. I don't have to now have the campers bring some of their own food, which is what they were doing. So for him, it was this great relief that now your folks will handle everything. I don't have to manage that. I just have to make sure the staff knows, what their dietary is. So for him, he was able to go back being a camp director, having the programming, doing that kind of piece. I do think too, the other part is we know from camp directors and our partners that we work with, when the food is great and the campers are talking about how much they ate, what they enjoyed, and they go home not having lost weight over camp, because we know camp keeps them very busy, and we're dealing with campers that are growing. So they're exerting a lot of energy. They're still in their growth stage. And so as long as we're keeping them fed with great nutritious food, they're enjoying it. Camp always knows, because they do surveys at the end of every camp. And when the food is rating high or extremely high, they're like, they'll come back. I am going to get this camper back is high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that I think is a huge ripple for us, is that ongoing food.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've talked about here, we've identified the challenges, right, that camps have.
Mhm.
And I think that we're saying like, hey, we have a solution to that.
Mhm.
But we also want to be real about the fact that we have learned a lot about this industry, and we didn't have all the solutions when we started out.
No.
And I know that there are some great stories of some learnings and just opportunities that we ran into getting into camp, because this is a very unique market, right? You're in
Mhm.
a secluded area. It is a short period of time. Everybody shows up to every meal, right? Because
Mhm.
they're at camp, and it's just part of their schedule. We have to serve people quickly so that they can get in and
Yeah.
get out and get back to their activities. There's a wide variety of tastes and preferences, right? You're dealing with kids from kindergarten all the way through high school. Then you also have the staff that might be college age generally, and then you have administrative staff that might be older. So we're talking about a pretty complicated operation. And so for us to walk into that, I'm just going to be honest, we were probably a little naive to,
Mhm.
some of the intricacies of camp food service and how it was different, right? We had really excelled in our Greek life business. And I think sometimes in business, you can make the mistake of having this confidence, right? That, oh, well, we've done such a great job in this Greek life business, and we've grown and we've really figured this out and we know it inside and out. And surely this camp thing's going to be easy. So Shanna, I'd love for you to take us back. One of my favorite stories that I hope that you share here today is from our very first camp
First.
that we served, and it was kind of our trial run to see whether or not we wanted to do this, whether it was going to work for us. And so we did a debrief, which we do with every camp at the end of every summer, to say, hey, let's talk about how the summer went, what was the good, what was the bad, and hopefully we're talking about next summer and what that looks like. So take me into that conversation with you and I on the phone with this camp that was our very first camp.
Well, and we'll go back. It was pre-COVID too. So we're going back to where camps were kind of really at their peak of attendance. And
Sure.
so we talked with the camp, and they said this camp happened to run over the 4th of July. We were on a college campus, is where they were doing it. And they said, your camp or your staff lit off fireworks on the 4th of July. And I think you and I were like, oh, crud. This might be really bad
and
for us.
not just a few
And
fireworks. Our understanding was it was
so
one of the best shows in the area,
best shows.
is the understanding.
Yes. And I thought, oh my, this is it. Our first camp. It won't be a reference for us to ever use. We're done. And they said that was an issue. However, the food was the best we'd ever have, and we look forward to having you back next year. And I think you and I got off the call, talked to each other later, and went, okay, that didn't go as we planned, but this is great. We can light off fireworks, which we don't want to do again, but we can come back. And
yes,
I think,
and I think that camp,
that was
Shanna,
like,
if you remember, that camp was on a college campus. So they had rented
it
a college
was
campus. So if you can think, having a fireworks show in the middle of a public
college.
government institution on 4th of July, probably having the campus police called, right, on our staff to stop this fireworks show.
Yep.
And I think, to your point,
Ugh.
as an entrepreneur, this will be a funny story for the entrepreneurs. The first thing I thought after I thought, oh my gosh, we can't ever let that happen again, right? Of course I thought that. But the next thought I thought was, man, if we can shoot off fireworks and practically get staff arrested at a camp, and we can still come back the next year, then this is a great vertical that we need to really be, continue to dive into, because they really need our help, right? If the standards are that low. And so I think that we learned a lot from that, and we built a lot from that. And that was really kind of that beginning of saying, okay, in year 2, we're going to solve the problems that we heard about in year 1. And I think, Shanna, that would be a great thing for you to talk to. Like, you get to talk to these camps year after year after year in these debriefs. And I think some of these camps do tell us that. They're like, hey, we told you some things we wanted you to improve last year. And then this year we saw those improvements made.
Yes. Well, I think that goes to part of our debrief. And then now David's on there. And so he has developed a lot more staff training. So we have gotten a lot of that positive feedback when they have said, we wish they would have done this differently, or we need them to do this. And then we develop, or I should say, David develops the training for that. And we come back the next year and they are so pleased, said, you do listen during the debrief, because I think at the beginning people thought, this is just kind of a mouthpiece. We're going to do this
Right.
debrief. If we have something we want changed, you're not going to do it. And we have tried to make those changes every year with that camp, whether it's retaining the same staff, changing out a camp manager if need be. The other part of the debrief, which we have found out, is in the Girl Scout world, you get a camp name. And so one year, David and I were doing it, and they kept saying, we love Mystic. We want Mystic back. And we were going, I finally
Who is
said
Mystic?
to them, I said to them, we'd love that, but we don't know who this is. And they were like, oh, and you could see them internally, because they were in a room together looking at each other going, oh, we don't know her real name. We just know her camp name. And so David and I were like, can you describe her? And we got to the point where we knew who it was, but we have found on all of our debriefs with them, with that Girl Scouts, is they tend to use the camp name. And so
Right.
I know David will say when he's recruiting, you'll get a camp name. Be careful what you say, because your first name is who you're going to live with for the summer. And
Yeah.
we have had some interesting ones, Toast
Yeah.
and Rutabaga, and we kind of go,
Make
I
a
don't know
good
who that
first
is.
impression, so you make sure you get a good name for the summer, right? One of my favorite early stories and early learnings was actually on the recruitment side. And I remember that we used to basically just the first couple of years, we would say, hey, would you like to go to camp? And, we were trying to get people, our employees, as we talked about earlier, to camp so they could get paid year round. And we had an employee that we just didn't do a good job of telling them what camp was going to be like, right? What were the environment going to be when you go to camp? And so this chef, he packed up everything that he had, right? Like he was going to be moving. Granted, he was going to be there for 8 weeks, but he brought his gaming chair, his PS5, all of his devices, like all of this stuff that hooks up to the internet. And he arrives at camp to the realization that there is no Wi-Fi at this camp. And so, talk about a disappointed chef who has, lugged all of their prized possessions across the country to go to camp and then can't even use them. And I think that for us, David has done such a great job now of setting the expectation, right? And also raising our standards, right? So like a camp that has living conditions that aren't acceptable for our staff. I mean, David, talk us a little bit through how you've solved for that. Like, we do a site visit for every single camp now, right? No employee is going to show up to a kitchen or a living environment that has not been inspected by our team.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, as you said, we learned early on that signing contracts sight unseen is probably not the best route to go to get people committed and expect them to stay for the whole summer. We've had situations with open air cabins where, you got snakes and insects crawling in on people's face while they're sleeping. But we learned very quickly that, we need to vet these people, make sure that, the location and the facilities are adequate for the staff that's going to be there. And like you said, every single camp that we sign with, at the bare minimum, they have to send us extensive photos of both their kitchen and their housing to ensure that they can adequately accommodate the services that they're requesting for the volume that they're doing.
Right. But the one thing I think that's interesting, though, is that, you don't have to have world-class facilities in order for us to be able to serve you. But it's important that we know what your facilities are, because I think we have a subset of our staff that would actually prefer a more rustic setting. And, we have a few people that say, hey, if I have a place to pitch my tent, or, pull my camper up in the, the back of the camp area, I'd be happy as heck to go to camp all summer and be able to do that and be out in the wilderness. And then we have others that say, man, if I don't have air conditioning, I'm not going to be able to go to camp, right? If I don't have Wi-Fi, I'm not going to be able to go to camp. And so I think that's what's nice about having 2,500 employees that are at sort of our, our ability to call on is that we have this wide variety of employees that can kind of fit these different scenarios. And so just understanding what the scenario is then allows us to go out and say, hey, here's what the living conditions are going to be, and here's what the accommodations are going to look like, so that people know going in and have that level of expectation. I think that's really important. So I love those stories, because whether you want to be honest or not, if everyone truly was honest about their business, every business has stories like that. Right? Every business has the stories where they just didn't quite get it right, where they just didn't quite understand what they were getting into, where an employee did something that was just kind of crazy. And I think it's important that we don't hide from those stories, right? That we don't try to hide behind this mask that, oh, well, if everything is perfect at Upper Crust Food Service. Like, the reality is, like, that's what we learn from. We learn from those experiences. And I think the camps that have had us for multiple years, one thing that I hear is that they say, like, every year, they're like, this was our best summer, right? You guys solved these things from last summer and it's our best summer. And then this summer, it's like we're solving 3 more things for them, right? And it's this idea that we never want to come in thinking that our service is perfect or that everything that we do is exactly right, because we have to realize that things evolve, and we're also continually raising the bar. And that's what I love about building a business, is that, the bar that we had when we started our camp program is way different than the bar that we have today. Right. And a lot of that is due to the things that we've done with bringing in our dedicated leadership. And so I'd really like to transition now to this idea of building this business, because really that's what we did. We took something that was a need that we had to take care of our employees, and we've now turned it into a legitimate vertical within our business. And the first thing that we did was we said, we're going to treat this as a completely separate vertical from the rest of the business, right? This is not going to be an afterthought. This is not going to be a little side hustle. This is actually going to be a dedicated part of that. And David, that has not been an easy process, because if you think about our staff, a lot of, especially on the management side, a lot of them have been with us for a long time. And when they started with us, they thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to have the summers off. Right. And then all of a sudden, here comes David Luther running our camp division. And he says, hey, Mr. Manager and Mrs. Manager, I actually need your help this summer, because we have hundreds of camps that we're, going to be serving. And so walk us through that, David.
Yeah. So it was a struggle at first, getting participation and not just participation, but good participation from the management team, understandably, because like you said, they had this understanding that, all right, I'm working a 9-month year here. But over time, you really started to see some great buy-in, and I got to give a lot of credit to our management team, because they have really stepped up. They're doing the majority of the recruiting, setting that expectation, like you said, and with the systems that we now have in place that we've elevated to provide a lot more opportunity for staff across the country to go to different places. It's definitely come a long way.
And tell me a little bit about building this business. You are a really great operator, and you have a lot of great systems, right, that you've put in place, and you've really customized SOPs for camp, because there really isn't another industry in the country where you can just pull an SOP and say, we're going to use this, because camp is so unique and so different. So talk to me about sort of how that has evolved over the last 3 years on your training and your SOPs and sort of getting all of that up to speed.
Yeah. So, going back to what we were talking about earlier, coming in from Greek and having that assumption that, hey, we can do it in Greek, we can do it in camp. Well, learning that was not necessarily the case, but to go a step further, no camp is similar to another camp. Like, obviously within particular national associations and stuff, there are some similarities, but every single camp is unique, between the setup, the traditions, the expectations, and with, food service being as woven into the culture as much as it is. Like, you've got the baked potato songs at some camp, and you got Jello eating contests and stuff like that. So it's kind of been hard to write SOPs because it isn't standard for anybody. But we have figured out what certain SOPs that can make us have that proactive approach to things have allowed us to flourish while still having that unique personal touch for each individual camp.
I think that's so important that you hit that, because our standard operating procedure is actually to be flexible. right? I mean, that's like in that standard operating procedure is like, hey, these traditions of camp, when you hire Upper Crust to come in and work in your camp, we can't tell the camp how the tradition should be done, because in many cases we have camps of these traditions have been part of the camp for decades, right? And so our goal is to go in, embrace them, sometimes even find ways to enhance them for the camp, make it easier for the camp to have these traditions be part of what they do. But from my camp experience, it brings me full circle because it was actually a kitchen experience, but we had this coffee cake that was unreal at the camp that I went to, and they served it every Sunday. And if you got rid of coffee cake on Sunday morning after the church service at camp, like there would have been absolute revolt on that campus, right? And or on that at that campus. And I think it's just really important to understand that those traditions are important and those are passed down from generation to generation. And it's, I actually have the recipe for the coffee cake that we served at our camp that they gave to us. And I have that, and we can make that at our house. And so I think that's how important these camps are. And you think about how many parents went to camp and send their kids to the same camp, right? And just sort of this tradition that's built. Talk to me a little bit, David, about, as we built this business, about your menu development, because I think that's a pretty big piece that's important, because traditionally in camps, I think you have very repetitive menus, maybe food quality, is a little bit more of what we call like can to pan, right? Really easy stuff to kind of heat and serve. And so like, what a difference can it make when you actually have some menu engineering and you're starting to make things from scratch? And so just talk to me about how your team approaches that.
Yeah, so I mean, we've obviously got a nice menu library with, having all the Greek accounts and clients and partners that we have. Obviously, we need to look at gearing it more towards our customer base when it comes to camp. So we've kind of taken those every time we do an intake or an onboarding for a new partner. We ask if they have past year's menu samples that they can send us so we can get an idea of the scope of what they're looking for. But between that, working with procurement to see if there's better products available for these things, and then working with the camp themselves to collaborate and develop these menus and keeping them obviously within a reasonable cost point, but figuring out all those different factors. But the majority of it comes down to those factoring those traditions and collaborating with the camp on making sure that we're building a menu that they enjoy. We typically try and do at least at minimum a 3-week rotation on menus, because granted, you may have a week to week change in your camper registration, but those same staff are still eating every week. So you're looking at staff who are already tired by week 2 because they've already tasted it twice now. So it's a fun experience to try and expand on, what typical camp food has been.
And a lot of our camps too. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Shanna.
No, I would say too, the great part of our staff coming to camp is they're also bringing some of that Greek experience. So we've had a couple camps where the staff has been at one of our kitchens from a campus, and they would be like, "Oh, I recognize that chef. You cook in our house." And so there's that connection too, I think, with our staff, or our staff with the camp counselor staff. But I think too, we've elevated it from garnishing, doing those special touches that you don't get from, if they previously had been doing like a heat and serve. We're bringing it up a notch where it's been elevated. The camp staff directors really appreciate it because they're seeing the care that's going into it.
100%. I mean, food is fuel, right? Food is fuel. Yeah. And so for these campers that are running around all day long, right? And these counselors who are chasing them around all day long, and you're extending you have so much energy that's heading out of your body. And it's like to go get something pre-processed at every meal, it's just not going to be a recipe for success at camp. And if you can go and you can get fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, you can get, foods that are made from scratch and stuff that's not coming out of a box and not being opened from a can. like it's just going to make the camp experience in that week go so much smoother for everybody. Their attitudes are better. They're happier, right? They feel healthier. They have more energy. So I think this menu development and this scratch cooking, I think it just can't be underestimated. And the other piece I thought that was really interesting about menu development, David, and maybe you can touch on this, is the situation with, a lot of our camps that have pack outs. So, sometimes for our staff, this is not just putting food on a buffet or putting food on platters and serving family style. Like we're actually having to think about some campers that might be gone for an overnight or an extended little mini trip within camp and going to be cooking on their own campfire. And how do you think about all the supplies and all that? So, chat about that real quick.
Yeah. Most camps that we work with in some capacity or another do what we call the pack outs. It's essentially a small scale drop house when you think about it. So figuring out all the different components that are necessary, making sure that there's nothing too raw potentially that could end up making them sick if they're cooking it on themselves and they're doing it improperly, because clearly they don't have the serve safe, certifications that our chefs do. But, as small as remembering to put, ketchup in with the burgers, or it's a whole task in and of itself, where you're essentially creating a completely separate menu just for those, and making sure that whatever that meal is going to be is actually streamlined for that kind of production, because you're obviously not going to try and do spaghetti and meatballs in a Dutch oven, in one Dutch oven over a fire kind of a thing. So just making sure that it fits for whatever the situation is.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, we've built this business, and we've really focused on treating it like a business and making sure that we are solving our partners' problems, and that we're just continually evolving and continuing to get better. And we have a motto around here that's "We show up," and this motto is really across all of our verticals, and it's really a rallying cry for our team to say, look, we don't want to just go out and do the bare minimum, right? We want to show up for our partners. We want to show up for our coworkers. And so I'd love to hear some stories from you guys of ways that you feel like over the seasons here that our staff has shown this "we show up" attitude when it comes to camp. So what are some examples that come to mind?
I would say a couple of them. So we always tell camps, our folks will be as involved as you want them to be. And I know David uses that when he's recruiting. You can just show up and cook and do your piece, go back to your room, or you can be part of camp. And so we've had staff that have been part of their color wars that they do, that have been part of some camps will do a food theme, like it's going to be yellow food one day, green food the next, and the staff may all wear yellow that day or green that day. They'll go out and learn a lot of these songs that they sing at mealtimes and just be part of that. I do know we had a camp where our staff could partake in any of the water sports that they wanted. They just need to pass the swimming test or the treading test. But
Sure.
they could, they had the ability to use the kayaks, swim, the water slide, the boats, anything. So I personally think the more involved you are with the staff or with the camp and being part of it, the more you're going to get out as an employee versus thinking of camp as a, 7 to 3, 7 to 5, whatever that is. I think you just have to get involved with it.
Yeah. To your point, it's the employees that show up that have the best experience. Yep. And then in turn, those camps have the best experience with our company, because that's what they're looking for as well, right? They want staff that integrates. Camp is a family environment. It's a family atmosphere, right? It's a close-knit situation. Everyone is living in close proximity, and we always say this all the time, like camp is a happy place. Right. Camp should be a happy place. And we love working with our camp partners because camp people are happy people. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great "we show up" moment and a great encouragement to our staff to continue to show up in that way. David, how about you? You're on the ground every day. Any "we show up" moments that stand out to you?
There's, Again, credit to our management team. There's so many examples. I think some of the bigger ones tend to revolve around when things aren't going right for the camp, not necessarily the kitchen, but for the camp. For instance, there's one time where we had a massive thunderstorm rolled through, knocked out power to the entire camp right before a dinner service, and the campsite was scrambling to adjust programming, figure out next steps, and the kitchen was the last thing that they wanted to worry about in the moment, obviously. But our team immediately shifted into problem-solving mode, reworked the menu on the fly with something that we could execute safely with the limited equipment and product we had on hand, and we're still able to serve a full meal on time. And I mean, the feedback afterward was just about the meal. It was the camp leadership felt supported during a stressful situation and didn't have to step away from managing the broader situation.
Yeah, what a great example of showing up, and we're just really proud of our staff for embracing that motto. And we're certainly by no means would we say we're perfect with that, and we're still evolving and still trying to make sure that every one of our employees has the "we show up" mindset. But such great stories that are out there of that, and I appreciate you guys sharing those. So we've gone through a lot today in this podcast to talk about, our camp vertical and kind of talking about the origins of how we got started and the fact that this business, really got started out of a necessity, an HR necessity, right? Solving an internal problem where we wanted to give our staff an opportunity to get year-round employment so that we could retain them. And so that working at Upper Crust was the best hospitality job that they could find, right? And then we talked about the problems that these camps are having and the ways that we're solving, a lot of these things that have come up. And there's very specific challenges in running a camp because of the short time that they have over the summer season because of their remote locations. And so, we were able to kind of chat about how, our goal is to come in and solve those problems. We also talked about all the mistakes that we've made, right? The early learnings and the challenges that came up and the ways that this business has evolved, all the way through, talking with David about how he's grown this into a real business division for us, right? That this isn't a side hustle. This isn't an afterthought, that we are dedicated to camp and that camp is something that we do. It's part of our core DNA now and a big part of our business and what we wake up every day thinking about and trying to solve for. And so all of that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, my question always comes back to, why does it matter? We put a lot of work. David, you're working long hours. You're traveling across the country, right? You're recruiting people. You're all over the place. You're solving problems. You're putting out fires, literally, right? Why does it matter? So if you're a camp leader, why does what we do matter to a camp leader, David?
Well, I mean, at its core, great food service creates a dependable foundation for the entire camp operation. I mean, when that piece is handled well and handled properly, it gives the camps the freedom to focus on what really matters, which is delivering a meaningful and valuable, impactful experience for their campers. And for me, that's extremely rewarding.
Yeah, I very well said.
Yes.
How about the campers, Shanna? Why does it matter to the campers?
Well, I think to kind of go back to how we say it, Greek, Greek is you're breaking bread around a table, creating that brotherhood, sisterhood, and camp is the same way. They sit as groups at meal times. It could be over s'mores over the campfire, and the food and that camaraderie that you create around the meal is very important. It's very important for the camp culture. And the flip side is for a parent knowing my child is going to camp and is going to be well fed. They're going to come home talking about food. They may talk about the coffee cake and how do I create it at home. I just think that seeing them smiling, whether it's with their icy that they got as the snack or whatever they happen to do for a meal is really important. And the camper and the camp staff want them to have been well fed, well nourished when they leave camp. You kind of say you never want to see a camper go home and they lost 10 pounds. you want them to go back home talking about what great food they had and the great friendships they met.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's really where it hits home with campers is what you said there at the end, which is, we know that some of the best memories are made around the table, right? And that good food just gives us an environment in which these amazing memories that you're going to remember the rest of your life are formed. And at camp, it's really unique because it's not always in the dining room, right? Sometimes, like you said, it's at a campfire. It's hot dogs late at night, at a traditional event on the campsite. And it's just really cool for us to be able to be a part of those traditions and to be able to be part of these family memories that are passed down from generation to generation. So the last thing I want to cover today is where do we go from here, right? So we've built this camp business now. We started with the one camp, right, where we shot off fireworks in the middle of the campus, and since then, we've grown into the largest provider of food service to summer camps in the country. So we've already made a pretty big jump here, right? But there's a lot more, I think that we can do for the summer camp industry. And so, what is next for us? What's the next thing that's going to happen? What does the future look like for Upper Crust camps?
Well, I think ultimately it just comes down to continuing to scale without losing that personal customized feel that our partners value. It's, working on building out our workforce, scaling on that side of things too, to where we can support more partners because there is so much opportunity still out there, and just continuing to refine and improve our processes and our relationships.
No, I love that. And Shannon, I think another area that you could hit for us real quick, because you're close to this, is we are so invested now in the camp community that there's some things that we're doing that have nothing to do with revenue, right? That have nothing to do with building our business, that only have to do with making the camp experience better. And so, talk to us a little bit. Like this summer, your team is going to be at Jamboree, and
Yes.
we're actually going to be, certifying scouts from Scouting America with their cooking badge. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So, one of our great partners is Scouting America. And so we'll be at Jamboree. It's 11 days. I'll be there for 11 days. I really thought David and some of his team was going to be there for 11 days, but it's height of camp season, so they'll be in and out. But we worked with Scouting America to be cooking badge certification, and we're going to teach 4 of the components of the badge at Jamboree. And Jamboree, they'll have about 20,000 scouts. Not every full troop goes, so there's portions of it. As we've talked to our current camps, we found out most of the camp leaders do not go because, of course, they're running camp. So this will be a real mix of people from across the country. It happens every 4 years. The interesting part is the cooking badge. If you're going for your Eagle Scout, the cooking badge is a requirement you have to do. So we could see some scouts that are part of that Eagle badge or the Eagle program, but we could also see some that just want to do the cooking badge as just a standalone. So we're excited about this, and it will be a lot of fun.
I remember, Shanna, as a Cub Scout, I just wanted every one of those badges I could get, right? I didn't even have the foresight to think, I want to become an Eagle Scout at some point.
Yep.
I just wanted every badge I could get, and I would run around and drive my dad crazy saying, hey, we got to go do this activity. We got to go do this thing. I've got to be able to get that new badge before the next meeting. So it's fun to come full circle and be able to support these campers and scouts and all these different organizations that we work with. But I think that is really at the heart of what it is that we're trying to get done here. And we say around here that our company wants to be about food service that matters to people that matter, and to the families across the country who matters more than their kids, right? And for us to be able to be a part of raising kids and giving them good nourishment and giving them great experiences, I think, to David's point, we want to be able to continue to grow because we think we have a service that's providing, something that's really great to these families and to this industry. And so what we want to do, though, is make sure that we continue to do that. As long as we can do that at a high level, we want to be able to serve as many campers and camps across the country as we can, so that every camp has an opportunity to have a wonderful camp season and not have to worry about all the things that happen in the kitchen, and be able to focus on what it is that they do best. So I'm really proud of you guys. I'll say that publicly for what you've built. Shanna being with me from the very beginning on this, and David really making this real for us over the last few years, and just being such an excellent operator for our team. So thank you guys for that. And I'm really looking forward to the future. So let's see how many s'mores we can serve this summer.
Well, and we'll see you at Jamboree.
That's right. That's right. I'll be there. Maybe I'll try to get a badge. I might be too old for the badges, but I might try to get one. So guys, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Seasoned Leaders. The growth of our camp division is a reminder that some of the best opportunities in business come from simply solving problems well and staying open to what those solutions can become. In our next episode, we'll hear from team members who joined Upper Crust through acquisitions and share how those transitions created new opportunities for growth. Until next time, thanks for listening and stay seasoned.